where chilling thrillers get crystal clear. Today, The Tenant by Freida McFadden. Blake Porter's life looks perfect. VP job, dream brownstone, fiancée Krista. Until he's fired and they take in a tenant, Whitney Cross. Then the house turns. Hostile. Missing food, rotting apples, fruit flies, and late-night thumps spiral into a neighbor's murder and a bag of severed fingers. As paranoia peaks, identities crack. Nothing and no one is what they seem. Stay to the end for the breakdown of the biggest twists, who's pulling the strings, and how the finale flips victim and villain. Hit subscribe for more fast, spoiler-smart deep dives. Welcome to Audicpidia. The Tenant follows Blake Porter, a Manhattan marketing VP whose perfect life unravels after a blindsiding firing pushes him and his fiancée, Krista Marshall, to rent out a room in their newly purchased brownstone. The tenant they choose, Whitney Cross, triggers a cascading series of intrusions, retaliations, and revelations that expose an elaborate revenge plot tied to hidden identities, past tragedies, and murder, culminating in a violent confrontation and morally ambiguous aftermath for all involved. Blake is fired over alleged corporate betrayal, loses income, and agrees to rent a room to stabilize finances. Whitney Cross, a seemingly ideal tenant, moves in with minimal belongings and a deferential manner that quickly proves misleading as small boundary violations compound into systemic household sabotage and psychological warfare. Food theft, personal item, misuse, rotting produce hidden in cupboards, and a pervasive fruit fly infestation heighten tensions. A household goldfish's suspicious death, bleach odors, and lipstick-stained shirts push Blake toward obsession and rash retaliation, eroding trust with Krista and isolating him emotionally and physically in the home he can no longer control. Longtime neighbor, Mr. Zimmerly, is found dead amid ongoing disputes and creeping police scrutiny, while Blake discovers a hidden bag of severed fingers, an escalation from petty cruelty to a tableau of staged violence, driving him into amateur detection to unmask Whitney's past. Investigation reveals a layered identity scheme. Whitney is not who she claims, and Krista's link to Whitney Cross reframes earlier events as pieces of a calculated revenge architecture, including poisoning and framing maneuvers designed to dismantle Blake's credibility and freedom. Amanda Lenhart, the real young woman operating under the Whitney alias, emerges with her own coercion-driven motives and survival calculus, interrupting Krista's plan and redirecting the endgame through a morally gray intervention that saves Blake while exposing the full extent of Krista's control strategies and violent history. The truth leaves no heroes, only survivors. Blake relocates and tries to rebuild. Amanda carries the weight of her choices, and the brownstone stands as a memory palace of paranoia, manipulation, and the corrosive effects of secrecy, class pressure, and performative domestic perfection. Extended Characters Compendium. This section foregrounds character depth, motivations, contradictions, and arcs for long-form content creation, including suggested beats, scenes, and psychological framing for each figure. Blake Porter role. Primary narrator and unreliable lens whose career loss catalyzes the rental decision and the domestic descent into suspicion and retaliation. Core motivation. Validation through status and control. Driven by anxiety about a modest upbringing and the fear of sliding backward. Financial precarity amplifies fragility and defensiveness. Traits. Charismatic but insecure, reactive. Oscillates between righteous outrage and petty vengeance, e.g., dramatic response to infestations. Signaling susceptibility to manipulation and self-sabotage. Arc. From self-styled provider to isolated suspect, then to a survivor marked by guilt, trauma, and a destabilized identity. His late-stage dependence on others to survive underscores his loss of agency in the very home he bought to represent success. Krista Marshall, alias use connected to Whitney Cross. Role: intimate partner, strategic architect of a long-game revenge. Framework that repurposes domestic routines as instruments of control and punishment. Core motivation: control and retribution rooted in past harm. Her methodology suggests an effort to narratively rewrite victimhood by inflicting exacting consequences on perceived betrayers and liabilities. Traits: poised, meticulous, two-faced warmth, uses caretaking rituals, baking, household planning, as cover for surveillance and poisoning, weaponizes social perceptions of femininity and innocence. Arc: gradual reveal from supportive fiancé to cold strategist whose masks slip under pressure. The endgame exposes both extreme competence and a capacity for violence detached from ordinary moral limits. Whitney Cross, identity construct. Role: a vessel identity used to destabilize perception, complicate tenant rights, and enable proximity. The Whitney in Blake's home is actually Amanda, while Krista's connections to the Whitney name anchor the deeper con. Symbolic function: the malleability of identity and the performative nature of domestic roles. A mirror for how easy it is to project desire or fear onto a slim profile of facts. Amanda Lenhart, the tenant posing as Whitney. Role: secondary protagonist and counterpoint narrator whose survival-driven choices complicate the binary of victim. And villain: ultimately thwarts Krista's lethal plan. Core motivation: survival amid debts and coercion. Her willingness to assume an identity and embed within a dangerous dynamic speaks to desperation more than inherent malice. Traits: observant, adaptive, morally ambiguous, maintains enough empathy to intervene decisively in the climax even as she withholds truths to preserve safety. Arc: from instrument in a con to decisive agent who draws a line at murder, accepting complicity but rejecting further bloodshed. Post-climax reflection centers on the cost of survival and lingering ties to violence. Mr. Zimmerly, neighbor. Role: a symbol of long-term stability and the neighborhood's moral gaze. His death escalates the stakes from domestic conflict to homicide. Suspicion: thematic function, the brittle veneer of community civility. Old guard homeowners' friction with newcomers and the ease with which a dispute becomes a narrative of guilt. Elijah Meyer's role: facilitator, enabler, linked to identity arrangements and Krista's manipulations. His fate demonstrates the danger of proximity to secrets. Thematic function: loyalty warped into liability, collateral damage in the orbit of a controlling protagonist. Supporting ensemble: prospective tenants, diner staff, police. Function: texture of urban oddity and procedural. Pressure: interview scenes foreshadow the risks of porous boundaries and the legal quagmire of evictions that empower a malicious tenant to embed and escalate. Act 1. A perfect life tilts, inciting incident. Blake is abruptly terminated on suspicion of corporate espionage. Shock gives way to denial and need. A rental ad becomes the pragmatic fix and a narrative trap. Setup beats. Tenant interviews veer from quirky to threatening. A pleasant diner waitress, Whitney Cross, appears reasonable and moves in with strikingly few possessions. A red flag. Blake rationalizes away. Act 2. Domestic siege-rising actions. Missing toiletries and food, hidden rotting apples and fruit flies, allergic rashes, night noises. Blake's retaliation, e.g. dumping maggots, escalates hostilities and undermines his credibility with Krista, and later, authorities. Midpoint turn: the goldfish death, bleach smell, staged sympathy gestures, and lipstick-stained shirts shift. The balance: Krista leaves for space, isolating Blake while Whitney leverages tenant protections to remain entrenched. Act 3. The mask fractures investigative sequence. Blake pursues Whitney's past, uncovering ties to accidents and a dead ex, raising the specter of a serial pattern or, at minimum, a willingness Perspective shift. A reveal aligns Krista to the Whitney identity nexus. The tenant's identity, Amanda, and Krista's design indicate a revenge lattice, including poisoning and frame-ups designed to crush Blake's autonomy. Act 4. Convergence and break showdown. Amanda interrupts Krista's lethal sequence, turning on the puppeteer. Violence is both personal and emblematic, ending the cycle even as it brands both women with moral ambiguity and trauma. Denouement. Blake survives but is remade by fear and loss. Relocation and retreat signal a hollow victory. Amanda, no longer concealed, lives with the weight of necessary harm. The Brownstone remains a haunted memory of class aspiration curdled into siege psychology. Themes and psychological scaffolding, identity as performance. Names, roles, and curated. Routines become weapons. The home, meant to signify stability, is recast as a theater for deception and coerced intimacy, gaslighting and control. Small violations create doubt, then discredit. Domestic objects, apples, bleach, makeup, fish, are repurposed into signals that recode reality against the target. Class and entitlement. The Brownstone symbolizes upward, mobility and legitimacy, yet its legal and social environment constrains the owner, revealing how ownership and control diverge under urban systems of rights and optics. Revenge ethics. The narrative interrogates whether harm can be balanced. Krista's absolutism exposes revenge as identity maintenance rather than justice, while Amanda's intervention reframes survival versus complicity. Unreliable memory and narration. Blake's perspective magnifies paranoia and blindness to his own failings, making the later reveals feel inevitable in hindsight. Readers are implicated in misreading cues. The Brownstone, both trophy and trap. Floor divisions allow surveillance, concealment, and asymmetric power, despite legal tenant rights, amplifying claustrophobia. Rotting apples, fruit flies. Decay hidden in domestic spaces. An infestation. As metaphor for untreated grievances and concealed sabotage, goldfish and bleach, innocence and performative care undercut by a sterilized death, a macabre rehearsal for larger harm and a credibility play against Blake. Lipstick and shirts, sexualized misdirection calibrated to destroy trust with Krista, the body and intimacy weaponized in a forensic theater of suspicion, severed fingers, a grotesque calling card that punctures any pretense of harmlessness, and anchors the legal stakes beyond squabbles into capital crime terrain. Structural techniques for long-form adaptation. Three-phase perspective. Begin with Blake's linear descent, pivot mid-late with a dossier-style chapter revealing Krista's construction of the Whitney network. Conclude with Amanda's confessional that balances culpability and rescue, maintaining tension even after the core twist. Beat pacing. Use short, scene-driven chapters for domestic escalations. Intersperse with investigative set pieces that widen the world. Trips, phone records, school officials. Then compress time violently in the climax to simulate shock. Motif. Recurrence. Recur household objects. Apples, bleach, fish, lipstick as anchors. Each recurrence advances the power struggle and signals a narrative fuse burning down. Psychological dossiers, Blake. Explore childhood scarcity memories that map onto hoarding control over career and home. Show early micro-failures at work, foreshadowing susceptibility to setups. Dramatize the moment he chooses retaliation over documentation, sealing his narrative unreliability. Krista. Seed vignettes of meticulous list-making and helpful interventions. Couple these with moments of dissociation or chilling calm. Reference a formative loss that rationalizes domination disguised as care. Amanda. Right scenes of debt. Intimidation and identity theft's first rehearsal. Counterbalance with moments of genuine empathy. E.g., comfort to a diner coworker. To sustain reader alignment, even as she lies. Blake Krista. Track communication erosion via practical disagreements. budgets, chores that mask deeper fractures, punctuate with artifacts, the fish funeral, that show outsider optics flipping guilt assignments. Blake, Whitney, Amanda. Stage surveillance, counter-surveillance. Escalate from passive-aggressive notes to open confrontation. Ensure that law and policy become shields for the antagonist's presence. Krista, Amanda. Implied off-page leverage. Transforms in the climax. Highlight the pivot from exploitation to resistance through a single decisive act of violence, then moral accounting. Law and optics eviction difficulty. Emphasize NYC constraints that turn the owner into a procedural hostage. Fuse legal inertia with psychological attrition. Neighborhood lens. Use Mr. Zimmerly's long tenure to stage scenes where legacy residents interpret disputes through entrenched biases, tilting suspicion toward Blake. Thanks for watching Audicpidia. If this audiobook is useful for you, please support our channel, like, share, and subscribe. The Tenant proves that in a city of locked doors, the scariest mysteries start at home, where identity, paranoia, and revenge collide. If this breakdown helped decode the twists, tap like, drop a comment with the wildest moment for you, and subscribe for more thriller deep dives every week. Next up on Audicpidia, a fast take on unreliable narrators and how the Tenant flips victim and villain. Chapters and references are in the description for quick recap. Until then, trust no tenant, question every story, and keep listening.